joystick tails and button cues. Welcome to Gaming Views. Level up, we're on the go. Power-ups in the audio flow. From the retro to the new reviews. It's a life of games with Gaming Views.
Hello and welcome to the first episode of Gaming Views, the new sub-series of Casting Views that's going to, take a look at gaming. For this, I've invited a very good friend of mine. It's another Dan. Dan seemed to be my co-host for certain episodes. It's Dan H. Hiya, Dan. How you doing?
Very well, thank you. Yes, very well indeed.
So one of the things I was going to say is, and people that listen to this know I say this a lot, but I was saying to Dan, I never get intros right. I always struggle with the intros, and we've taken about 6 or 7 minutes to get this started right, which included me accidentally deleting stuff off my soundboard and then having to go run and get another laptop.
Dan's inability to use an Xbox headset. Yeah, that's
yeah. That was the other Dan, not this Dan. This Dan's just inability to get podcasts going, even though I've been doing it for 4 years now. But we're here now. We're recording, so. Yeah, just to set the scene for people listening. So we've known each other, about 16, 17 years now, isn't it? We worked together. You were my manager at one point. And I think one of the things that has always been a theme with us was gaming. And yeah, we kind of met up again recently. We're going for walks on a Sunday. And we just, a big part of the walk ends up being gaming. And as my mind always working, I was thinking, this would be good. I've always wanted to do some episodes on gaming. And then we're both of an age where we've been gaming for a while, right?
I'm nearly rocking 50 and a granddad at that. So yeah, I'm both old and 2 generations in, and still gaming and still loving it.
So I thought you'd be the perfect person to start this with. And on what you said, I don't know if you sort of do social media much, but there's always these posts. It's like, where my 30 plus gamers at? If you're 30 plus and you're still gaming, let me know. And I'm thinking 30.
That seems very young. I mean, that's the age of my doctor generally.
Yeah. Well, what do they think? Like once you get past 30, that you just end up, you hate technology. you
just jack it in. Yeah. You essentially become a boomer. And can't use your mobile phone anymore and just give up. Yeah, I mean, I think that's, trust me, there have been times when I've felt like doing that, but thankfully haven't, moments in my life where I've gone, maybe I should just not game. And it's, never come to fruition.
That's it. I think if anything, I game more because it's a cruel twist of fate, isn't it? That when you've got the time to game, is normally before you start working and you don't have the finances to fund it. Then when you get the finances to fund your gaming, you end up doing that thing called work.
Yeah, I think it generally does take the priority because it's what pays the bills, and I've never been good enough to pay the bills through gaming, unfortunately. Not that I'm competitive in that way, shape, or form in any way, but you're absolutely right. You get to that point and you're like, I actually have disposable income. What am I going to spend it on? I tell you what, let's spend 70 quid on a game, which is, which sounds, when you're 18, sounds crazy because that's like, 5 good nights out.
I tell you what I spend my money on is called a backlog now. That's what I say.
Yeah, the stack that gathers dust, or Game Pass as I call it, which is generally what I do. I'll earmark all of those things to play later and just don't get around to it.
Right, because we've already got off to a roll. I want to just play a quick ad from a friend of the show, and then we'll get stuck into it. So let's hear from Alex and Josh.
Hey Josh, I'm finally ready to do something fun every Wednesday.
Alex, finally! We're going to talk superheroes, movies, animation, comics, and much, much more, right?
Yes, but we're also going to talk Star Trek.
Make it so, my friend. Catch Talking Smack every Wednesday on your podcatcher of choice. We'll see you there, Smackheads.
And if you're not already, go listen to Talking Smack. I mean, firstly, they're great, but also you'll become a Smackhead. So, yeah, go to it now. So, Dan, right. So, eventually, I think we were talking literally this morning, right, that this will evolve and we've got ideas of how we want to evolve. But like I said, I want to just initially just talk about our history with gaming. Bear in mind, I want to keep this to about 90 minutes at most, so we might have to trim about 40 years history out. if I was going to ask you then, where did gaming start for you?
Do you know, I think my earliest memory of gaming, other than go to line 20 on a VIC 20, was probably was probably a ZX Spectrum, and there was a game that I remember playing a lot at my dad's when I eventually got the thing to work and janked the socket in the back and made sure it all worked properly. And it was essentially a take on NFL, but very 8-bit, kind of tiny dots, running plays and things like that. And I think that was probably my first memory of gaming. I mean, of course, you've gone around your mate's house and you've played on an Atari, or you've done those sorts of things, but I think around the same sort of parallel was that was for me was kind of that. But then, my first taste of, I guess, console gaming, which is primarily where my passion lies, was more in the when I got a Master System with the light guns and played Duck Hunt, and Alex Kidd and all those kind of things that just opened a whole new world for me and a whole new vibrancy. And I think, the Master System was certainly the thing that opened the floodgates. It was never a NES, weirdly. I talk to a lot of people about these things and oh yeah, I had a NES, people my age anyway, yeah, I had a NES, and it was the Nintendo thing was the buzz back then. But I kind of went a different route and went to the Master System, and and then onto the Mega Drive, and it kind of it just escalated from there. And now I've just got a house full of consoles, essentially. If it's new, I've got it. So yeah, but that doesn't mean I never loved Nintendo, because I do love Nintendo. And my first real journey past the Master System and things like that was with its SNES. And I remember clearly buying it through a Littlewoods catalogue and paying my mum back from a paper round to afford it, just to play Super Mario World. Do you know what I mean? And that for me, and then I take it with me. Like, you go and see friends and you take your SNES and you'd compete on Super Mario World, and you'd try and unlock all of the worlds. And it was just I got the again, light guns. I'm not a gun fanatic, but the bazooka thing that you got, all of those kind of things. It was always for me, and that's probably where I started and probably finished my first game, like completed, because and it wasn't Super Mario World. I was never that good, but Ocarina of Time was the first time I'd finished an actual game, and remember the joy of completing a whole thing. And that's probably why I love RPG so much now, because it's grown from that experience of collecting things and opening mother areas and Metroidvania type things. That for me is the purity of gaming. That's what I really enjoy.
And actually, I was going to say something. You said a good thing about like the difference between sort of Sega and Nintendo, and this pod is, we're never going to be like fanboying or fanning the console flames. However, we will have views on certain things, and I'm aware sometimes how passionate the community are. But you do tend to go down a path, don't you? Like, I remember when I was young, and that's the other thing, sort of, I said at the start, we are we're of a similar age. So I think the beauty that gives us is we have kind of seen the whole evolution, right? And I think that's where we can talk about. Yeah. I mean, I started very similar to you on a Commodore 64. Yeah. I just remember that's when I kind of fell in love with it. But also, that was the same time as, it's a whole other episode, but like the whole Game and Watch, the whole Nintendo Game and Watch.
I
like
had plenty
Mario
of those.
Tennis, the Cake Factory or whatever one. But sorry,
I still genuinely have muscle memory from those. Right? You can put your hand. Go. I know what that felt. It doesn't go to the phone. It goes to it's the muscle memory from a Game and Watch, right?
Yeah. I had Astro Wars, which people of a certain time will know that. I had a Pac-Man one, a Donkey Kong one. But where I was going, before I digress, is that most of the people I knew, so I didn't get a console till quite late on. I guess my first console was probably of sort was the Game Boy, which we'll come on to.
Yeah.
The first proper, I use air quotes, proper console would have been the PlayStation 1. So I don't know what we're looking at there, mid-90s. But getting back on point again, most people I knew that had a console, it was usually it was the Sega system or the. So I don't know if over here maybe
Outside of Japan, yeah,
Yeah.
I think it was. It was marketed a lot differently. My wife, I had a conversation. We don't often talk gaming, but she had a SNES with the robot, and and for
Okay.
her
Yeah.
family, that was the thing that they would play on. And so when I mentioned Master System, she's like, "What was that?" Because she's not a gamer. She's not. She understands. The Sega thing. It takes ages. She kind of
Yeah.
remembers and can connect with sort of bits like that, but she's not familiar with the way the consoles evolved. But yeah, I think a lot of people I knew went Master System, Mega Drive, and kind of went up that route, and then potentially even Dreamcast. As much of a failure as it
Yeah.
was, it was still
Yeah.
brilliant. So I think a lot of people did, and I knew very few people until the SNES came out and really hit the market that kind of went down the Nintendo route.
Now you mentioned Dreamcast there. I knew somebody. I worked with somebody who had one, and we were going out one night, and I think it was a tennis game on that, and that was a great little system, wasn't it? But
It was.
just didn't really
No,
take
but
off,
there
did
were
it?
so many around that time, and and for those people who might listen and weren't, potentially around that, things like the Jaguar and things like that, people kind of
Yeah.
go, I didn't, but I had friends who were probably more affluent. I mean, they owned Sinclair C5s, you know what I mean? So, these kids had parents
Yeah.
with a bit of dollar, and they had things like a Jaguar, which at the time, and the Neo Geo and things like that, and they were like, these things were hyper expensive at the time.
Yes. Yeah.
And so you got to see them, and you were like, because I think for most kids, the closest you got was a demo unit in Toys R Us, right?
Well, the Neo Geo was something I remember really wanting as a kid, but that was basically, it was arcade ROMs, wasn't it? It was like arcade
Yeah.
quality at home, and they were like, I think it was 300 quid a game, which
Yeah.
back then, I mean, it's a lot now, but
Yeah, if you wanted arcade quality in your home, albeit on an RGB, that was what you went for. You went for a Neo Geo, and it was,
yeah,
it was as close as you were going to get to going out and sticking a load of 10p's in Street Fighter 2 or Arkanoid or whatever game it was. That was as close as you were going to get. Not even the Amstrad or anything like that could come close.
And so if I was to go back, my next system was, the Commodore Amiga. So I stayed in the Commodore family. Now, I still hold, for me, the Amiga is probably one of my all-time favourite pieces of kit. Did you ever have either that or the Atari ST? Or
I had a Commodore 64 to an Atari ST, so it's a similar
the
sort of
ST,
thing.
right.
Yeah, I had the ST, so it's a similar sort of thing, right? It's like the Sega or Nintendo.
Yeah.
You had an Amstrad or you had the Atari.
Yeah.
And it's again, the Atari was quite a poor foray for Atari into mainstream computing. But it served a purpose from a gaming perspective. There were some cracking games on that, that like Blood Bowl was on the Atari ST, and people I think they're talking about remaking it and things like that. But at the time, you could play it on an ST, and it was phenomenal. I think it was on the Amstrad as well. But RoboCop as well. These kind of
RoboCop,
things
what
that
a
were,
game.
like all these things. You kind of go, oh my god, they were amazing back then. I
Yeah.
mean, my memory is shot to pieces. It's appalling. But those things are the kind of little glimmers of light that shine through, and you go, oh my god, I remember that, and it was so freaking cool.
The thing about those times as well. So like the Commodore 64, the Amiga, and the Atari ST were pretty similar. I think I've always had in my head that the Atari ST was predominantly better sound music. I think people who are in the music side would do it, and the Amiga was supposedly better on the graphics. But they were much of a muchness. And I've completely lost my train of thought there, which I know I'm going to do so much on.
Because I mentioned RoboCop. You see, it does it every time.
That's what I was going to say. So the Commodore 64, the Amstrad were cassette tapes, and the Amiga and Atari were the floppy disks. And this was also at a time where it felt like, well, and it was true, there was like the bedroom coders, right? So you had, I think the most expensive games were like the premium games were like 20 quid, which were a lot of money at the time. But you would get like the budget range, wouldn't you? Like the £5 games, or even on the Commodore 64, I remember the £1.99, and people were just churning out these games. And on the Atari and Amiga, you had freeware and shareware. So you just had so much coming out content-wise, didn't you?
Games were free on the front of magazines, right? That's the world we lived in then. It was, you were literally, you'd pick up a magazine and it would have a free, it wasn't a demo. It was the full game, I remember back to the magazines and there was a time where you could buy the magazine with a cassette or the floppy disk. Do you know what I mean? Like you had an option, depending on what system you had. And I think that speaks volumes to the churn, the stuff that was being put out by people and by these developers who were creating stuff in their bedrooms, and and then getting recognized and kind of going, do you know what, a great way to sell what you've created is to put it free, and we'll give you a small concession off the back of it. But it got that out to potentially thousands of people at the time who might not ever have seen anything like that, because marketing for games wasn't what it is now. The multi-millions and billions of pounds that are spent each year marketing things like Assassin's Creed and Doom, all of these, that didn't happen back then. Gaming was not that.
Well, you just said it yourself. Like, you reminded me about the gaming magazines, and again, for people, you're listening to two friends reminisce about the times going forward.
Very old people,
but we're talking about the love of it, right? And we will be talking about modern stuff eventually. But gaming magazines, right? That was where you got your content. You had to wait once a month for it to come out, right? And that was where you got your cheat codes and your walkthrough.
There was no internet. The internet did not exist. It was, it was a blink of an eye for somebody. It was David Berners-Lee was probably still in his basement, coding for it. So yeah, we were literally in a world where, you're right. You wanted news about something. And that anticipation of news about something you really wanted to know about, so you didn't have this great swathe of knowledge and comprehension of what was happening in the gaming world. It was not a thing. You literally kind of got a magazine, you went, oh, that sounds really cool, that's coming out, and there were no, they weren't sending pre-release demos and all of these things out to publishers or to magazines to try and say, oh, it's pretty cool, it works like this. It was literally, we're in the same place as you are waiting for it, and we think it might be cool. It was crazy thinking about it now, when everything is on tap right now. Everything is instant. I want that. I press a button, I got a gig download, and it comes down. Oh, look, 20 seconds later I'm playing Call of Duty, or then it was no, you're waiting a long time just to find out.
Yeah, and I remember, if you wanted help. So I remember having Monkey Island. I can't remember if it's first or second, but like, I loved the whole click and point and click genre. But they were famous for having quite obtuse puzzles, right? And one of them, I can't remember if it was the first or second, but was like on 11 floppy disks. And as we said, you didn't have the internet, but what you did have was very expensive phone lines that had hint number at the back. And yeah, I know somebody called it, and they spent about 5 minutes telling you through the options. And by that point, you spent 50 quid.
So little known fact for you. My very first full working job, apart from being in a cinema, was actually, I worked for Fujitsu, which was then ICL. And one of the contracts we had, so I was a team leader on a group of people who looked after customers, but one of the contracts we had was with Activision, BBC, as they were then, to do what you're talking about, to basically hint lines and advice on games, all of that stuff. So I ran a team of people who did that for a job, and most of our time, in all honesty, and I can probably safely say this now without fear of legal repercussions, most of our time was spent playing Quake on the LAN, kind of almost exclusively. So there wasn't much advice being given out other than here's how to rocket jump.
But a couple of things about the Amiga I want to say before we kind of carry on talking is I had the Amiga 1000, which was, get this, 0.5 meg memory, but it came again. My dad bought it off somebody who worked for him. It came with a 0.5 meg expansion to put it up to the full meg.
Oh, man. Yeah, I mean, you're talking Microsoft territory now. I mean, we'll sell a console. We'll sell a console with a terabyte for games that are extortionately large. But you can buy extra, and it won't be much. It'll only be half the price of the console.
But do you know what the funny thing about it was? It came in this huge metal. It was a metal tin basically that slotted into the side, and you could hear the board inside rattle. So if I bumped my desk, it crashed the computer. And it came out with that famous guru meditation error.
Those were the days, though. When you didn't have anything premium built. Yeah. It was held together with matchsticks and string, but it still worked.
Yeah, and this thing was bulky, right? And I remember it came with its own monitor, which was probably the size of a small house anyway, right? And this is what I'm coming to. The funniest thing was, so now you go around a friend's house, you probably do you remember with the PlayStation, you would have like your memory card, and you could
Yep.
just stuff the PlayStation in. If you're listening now, have a look at what the Amiga 1000 looks like, the size of it. And when I went to stay at a mate's house, I was bringing that, a monitor, my joystick, plus the games along. So it was like a massive like duffel bag on my back just to go stay at a
Dan was
mate's house.
packing heat just to play a few games.
Just to play Speedball 2. Yeah.
Oh, it's Speedball 2. Now you're talking.
So then for me, after that, I was going to say PC gaming. It's not because I was a PC gamer. I had to I got a PC for school and college work, right? And then I started doing PC, and then that was the world of the CD-ROM, right? Which was like we've got rid of the floppy disks, and we're now sort of playing games off CD, which felt quite advanced at the time as well, right?
Oh, you were, but you've skipped Laserdisc, right? I mean, you've skipped Lair of the Dragon on Laserdisc, and this kind of intermediary before CDs became cool. You might have to explain to some of the listeners what CDs are, but they'll probably know vinyl because it's cool.
Yeah.
But Laserdiscs, which were the size of a vinyl thing, and you put them into a player that was half the size of your bedroom, just to play. Again, something arcade quality. But I didn't go immediately into I found PCs, I think, quite late, ironically, even probably around the same time I was talking about that job. But for me, I kind of almost entirely skipped the first PlayStation. That wasn't a thing. I went from SNES to GameCube. So GameCube, and then in between that, I did have a Game Boy briefly, and I loved my Game Boy, and I took it on holiday to Tenerife, and got really frustrated, anger management issues at that time. Warning, punched the screen to bits because I got so frustrated with one of the games I was playing. It wasn't Tetris, thankfully, but it was. It was something. It was either like I think it was Balloon Kid or something like that. It was, and it was just, it's so, you get so far in it. And I just, and weirdly, my dad said he wouldn't buy me another one. So that was the end of my kind of Game Boy journey. But I kind of went to the GameCube, which for me, I think the thing that sold that was very much going into Toys R Us and seeing that demo unit and seeing Mario 3D and the leap from what you were so familiar with. I think closest was what was the tech that Nintendo had, the Z scaler thing with the they used on,
was it the no, not the Emotion Engine.
No, that was Sony. It was I can't remember what it's. We'll come back and edit in, but essentially that was kind of the closest thing that you got. And then seeing Mario running in 3D, so smooth. I mean, it was so clever and so typical now of what Nintendo do brilliantly, which is innovate on what's come before and make something very clever that hooks people. And that was, I think, their first genuine, hook, that kind of people went, oh my God, have you seen it?
Not because I've Googled it either, but it was either Mode 7 or Super FX.
Mode 7, I think, was the one I was talking about. But I complicated the words. But essentially, that was the thing. You go from that to a fully rendered 3D world.
Yeah.
And it was just, and I had to wait a while to get it. But even the controller was innovative, and it was a bit of a pain in the ass now because we're so used to. But it was the first one that kind of went, it could look like this.
Yeah.
And then Sony took it and kind of went, no, it should look like this. Because Sony at the time were working on the joint Famicom, PlayStation unit that went nowhere. But you can see where that kind of controller design with the kind of extended handles for your you kind of ring and pinky finger work, they come from that evolution of that kind of controller that the GameCube had. And again, kind of the little discs that it used. You talk about CDs, and that was kind of where
those tiny ones.
Tiny ones. So, but now it's all about scale now. Games are so big that
And this is it, right? That whole thing, which at some point we probably will discuss. But people say, "Oh, gaming's better now, game's better then." I think gaming's always been great. It's just
Yeah.
what you can do with it now. I mean, now Call of Duty on my Xbox is probably taking up 260 gig of space, whereas back then it was like like the Commodore 64. There's some games notoriously you couldn't finish because they didn't have enough memory to code the ending on
Yeah.
the end of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember the other thing I was going to say for me, because you've said a couple of things that jogged my memory, was I had a cousin who was sort of into gaming, and weirdly, unfortunately, we had different things. So when I had the Commodore 64, he had the VIC-20, then he got
Yeah.
the Amstrad, and then he got a Nintendo 64, which again, for me, was my first experience kind of at proper console gaming, and that was fascinating. But yeah, I had the Game Boy, the PC. Then as I said, my first one would have been the PlayStation. Then I had the PlayStation 2. Then I had to get rid of the PlayStation 2. Weirdly, I found the controllers were giving me pain in my hands.
Right.
Probably not because I was playing it for like 10 hours a day, I'm sure. But so I then went back to PC gaming. And then the funny story is, and again, I've said it before here, but it's not that I had a gaming rig. I had a PC that I bought games for.
Yeah.
And then do you remember the days when you had to look at the back of the box for the specs?
Yeah.
My PC was really struggling to run even the lowest ones. And at that point, it was like my wife took pity on me. And at one point she said, because I worked with someone who had an Xbox, and she goes, "Why don't you get yourself a console?" And that was it. I then bought the 360, and I kind of have never looked back, because the 360 was a great machine anyway.
Oh, yeah, and even down to the operating system, like the blades and that. I mean,
Yeah.
my not wife back then, my girlfriend, because I had kids quite young when I was kind of late 20s. I didn't really kind of gaming fell out of my life,
Mm.
and it really wasn't until I moved in with who is now my wife that she bought me an original Xbox for my birthday,
Right. Yeah.
with Halo.
Wow. Yeah.
And we'd only been living together a few months, I think, at that point. And she bought me this, and it reopened that previously closed door
Mm.
to gaming again. And
Mm.
couch co-op with friends coming around playing on
Yeah.
Halo was
Yeah.
like, it was just incredible. And we had so many amazing nights of fun, just like, ordering takeout and
Yeah.
getting the beers and just play it, just having another. It was a social activity,
Yeah.
to the point where I remember, sometimes we were like, we're going into town, blah blah, and we'd sit there and we'd be like, can't be asked, let's just do more of this, let's
Yeah.
just play more
Yeah.
campaign, let's just, and it reopened that, like I said, it reopened that door for me, and I fell in love with gaming all over again from that. And then I went into kind of modding, so went into modding the Xbox, did my own installs for a while, and used to install for other people some of the mods, that kind of thing. And then being able to use it as a movie player and play MKVs and things like that, which previously were things you couldn't have dreamed of doing with a console or with any other bit of kit at the time. We're still talking about DVD players and
Yeah.
region locking and things like that.
Yeah.
None of that.
Yeah.
You'd mod the Xbox, you'd take the case off, a bit of soldering, put it in, and you kind of opened a whole new world. So, but yeah, very quickly fell in love with the Xbox. I think got the 360, and probably at not too similar time, probably got a PlayStation 2. I skipped the PlayStation 1, like I said. And then for me, I was late to the PlayStation 2, to be fair. It was like the tail end of its life. And ever since, because of my love of consoles and games in general, I've always bought both. I've never been one or the other. I've more heavily drawn to the Xbox, I think, because it was the first super console that I got, in the original Xbox. And I mean, prior to all the kind of other, your NES and your SNES and things like that, it was the first one of the two dominant players in the market that I got. So I'd always kind of leaned towards it and bought things that weren't exclusives on it, but always had an eye on the PlayStation and what it was doing and where it was going. And I remember getting the PlayStation 3 and Killzone, and just absolutely tearing through it because it was such a good first person shooter. I thought it was Killzone 2 on the PlayStation 3, but those sorts of things. And you see these companies now producing stuff of such high quality and leading games in the market because of the work and effort they put in on these kind of earlier machines. And it just I've always kind of, and a lot of those exclusives were on PlayStation, certainly the higher quality ones. And I think you see that now with that deviation of market where Microsoft's decided to go and Sony's decided to go. And Nintendo's just like just done its own thing. It's like, well, screw it. I'll do me. You guys fight it out over there. I'm gonna go off and just do this weird shit over here. Like I'm gonna create a console with a stick. I'm sorry, you're gonna do what? Yeah, do you know what I mean?
Well, this is it. We've seen some crazy things. Like, remember when Sega got out the hardware market? That was massive, wasn't it? They just did
No one
games.
saw that coming.
Yeah, but
Dreamcast failed. I'm out. I'm gonna sell Sonic to everyone. Whatever it was, you know.
Yeah. But and that's the thing. Actually, probably should have said at the start. So yeah, you are fairly agnostic, aren't you, in terms of that, because you've
Completely.
got PlayStation and you do PC gaming. You've got the Xbox.
I do. Yep.
For me, I went PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2. Like I said, I just didn't get on with the controller. I think I do prefer the Xbox One. It's probably more for my hands. But then I did have the PSP as well. So I thought the Sony PSP was great. For a brief amount of time, because we both worked at the same place at a retailer and we got some discount. I remember having a PlayStation 4 for a brief amount of time.
Yep.
The thing is, because I've had the Xbox now since 2008, we were saying this morning, it's not that I don't like the PlayStation, I won't go to them. I've only got sort of time and space for one. And I've now got 16 years of backlog on my Xbox. So I find it hard to tear myself away from that. So, it's not that I prefer it over the other. It's just that, I've only kind of got time, especially with the podcast now. You kind of only do one. And I kind of do look over, as it were, the fence when a Spider-Man comes out or a God of War comes out. And I know it's something we probably want to talk about in an episode or two's time. But I think that's what I really enjoyed talking to you about this as well, is because, you've got that mix. Like you said, you'll even play on the PC, right?
Yeah, and the PC, I don't have an inordinate catalog on Steam, but there are certainly games on there, and a lot of kind of pre-releases that I really enjoy, and things I see that pique my interest. Like recently, I think we were talking about this. Obviously, the creators of Ori have come out with No Rest for the Wicked, which has gone through quite a tumultuous time. I mean, they're a fantastic bunch of developers, and they've really created something super special in an RPG that kind of people liken to kind of a Dark Soulsy type thing, but it's not once you get into it and once you play it. I think in a very sensible and cautious approach to it, you can quite quickly, become of a kind of power level that lets you work through the game in a sensible fashion. Not to say I didn't die lots when I first started playing it, but it's that handcrafted beauty of the world that they did so well with Ori and Will of the Wisps that it's kind of they've lent heavily into this, and you can tell, when you hear the Tomasz, who's the one of the lead guys on, you hear him talk about it, and he talks very much about it was always a passion project to deliver this thing and and create these worlds. And where they got into, they kind of released this game initially in pre-release. It went down brilliantly, and they very quickly acted to patch it and make it better, and quality of life improvements, all these things. And then there was a lot of wrangling with the studio, and now over months and months they've now bought out the publishers, and now will self-publish. So they've kind of recently released a video explaining all of this, and this is why we went quiet. And then there's a whole new half the size of the game again releasing on the 30th of April. But that was a real pleasant surprise when I'd seen it, I think again on a website or something, and kind of gone, that looks pretty good, I'll give it a go, and to buy it for like $17 or whatever, on Steam as a pre-release, knowing that like Baldur's Gate, you're going to get all of that content updates continually drip fed to you. And it's been a while, it's been over a year since it's been released, but it's just a phenomenal piece of work, and it's so beautiful. It's the artwork on it, I mean, it's not everyone's taste, but it's just a lovely game, and it will eventually launch on consoles and everything else. But I really enjoyed that. There's a few others, again, kind of pre-release things. There's a couple of what looks like a 16-bit first-person shooter built on the old Doom engine, actually,
right.
But in kind of a modern fashion. That's again, I can't remember the name, but it's a phenomenal play. So I haven't got a load, but there's some really nice things. Dark Sector was
Yes.
given away as a freebie
a
couple of weeks ago. So I was like, all right, I'm having that. right? Because I remember that game. I
Yeah.
loved it. You know, you and I are both huge fans of AA titles, you know, and that as a AA title, be, you know, getting back into that again, you know, for free because it was on Steam. But my love of PC gaming really stemmed from the granddaddy, which was Half-Life. You know, as
Yes,
a
yes.
as a genre-defining first-person shooter, you know, once you got past your Dooms and your Quakes and you kind of, well, where do you go with FPSs? It was, you know, all day long, it was Gordon with a crowbar, right? Because, you know, that the game, the story, and again, while I was probably in that same job supporting Activision, was kind of when that first one came out. And there was something about it that was so, so special and so good to sit and hammer at. And I remember long conversations with my brother-in-law and people about Half-Life 2, you know, and trying to watch videos in a janky download off the internet, you know, to see what it would be like and all these types of things, you know. And so my love of PC gaming really, I think, stemmed from that. Obviously, it was a transition through the Atari and all those things, but then getting back into it, you're like, oh, it's got to be Half-Life, man. I mean, it all day long.
Well, that was it. And I got into Half-Life quite late. It was on the
Orange box.
yeah.
Was it the orange
No, I
box?
think it was on the PC still. But I think I did play the first one, but much later. It was like for Halo, I got into it very late on. But I think it's like you said, because like Doom, Quake, and what was that, like Wolfenstein, they were just great shooters, right? But then Half-Life, I'm not going to say, you know, I don't know enough history technically to say whether it was the first one of its type like that, but it brought the story into it, didn't it?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
wasn't it Half-Life where you had a few add-ons and wasn't one from the view of one of the security guards?
Barney.
Was it
Barney.
Half-Life
Yeah.
1, wasn't it? Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
what kind of game did that at the start? You know, to imagine to have an add-on for a complete side character there.
Yeah, and I mean, look, that game, in my opinion, was the making of Valve, right? I mean, those guys, you know, you can argue that, you know, they're what is it, League of Champions, or is their, you know, their super defining game because it's so broad spread, but actually the game that made them. And there's a fascinating documentary about Half-Life, Half-Life 2, and so on, that they contributed to and talk about, you know, the kind of the steps they went through to get to where they are. But it's the thing that kind of, you know, made them as a company, and their whole ethos around leadership and people is just fantastic. And I think it's industry leading in terms of, you know, I'm sure there are horror stories behind the scenes, but, you know, in terms of most developers that come out of there only have good things to say about their time there. And then you look at where they've gone now, and they've kind of gone, well, we can do hardware, right? We can create,
Yeah.
you know, a Steam Deck. We can, you know, and again, almost industry leading, and people are playing catch up.
Steam Deck. Yeah.
Right, exactly, right. But people are now playing catch up, and they're going.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, we talked earlier today. We were talking about, you know, the potential of an Xbox handheld. You see that crack in the market, and you see what. All right. The Steam Deck was what 2-3 years old now, but it's taken that time for people to go. Oh, maybe people don't want to be locked into a room or carrying around an Amstrad to a mate's house to play on it. You know, maybe they want that flexibility, or not on my mobile. I don't want to use this thing for, you know, playing game. I've got a thing, the handheld. I haven't pulled it out once, right? But sell me an Xbox handheld all day long. I will buy that sucker, right? Because I've got my Game Pass on now. I've got, you know, and potentially if it's made by Asus or whoever, you know, I can access Steam, right? I can access.
If it can do that, I'm all in for it day one.
Do you know what I mean?
I haven't bought anything day one for a long time.
Oh, that's my guilty sin, I think, is day one purchasing. My last one being in the console realm. My last one being the PlayStation 5 VR. I signed up for the pre-register. I had the original one. I had the original PlayStation VR on the PS4 until my daughter decided to headbutt the floor with it playing a game and crack the lens. And so I invested in it, and I have to say it is a phenomenal piece of kit. Right, they've abandoned it effectively, which is really disappointing because it was very expensive. It's just seen a $200 price drop and all sorts, but it is a phenomenal piece of kit. I didn't do the PS5 Pro. It was a stretch too far. I heavily considered it, and I signed up for the ballot, and I actually got the opportunity to buy it, and I decided not to because I just I can't see what it gives me over and above what the PlayStation 5 can do right now. It's a little bit prettier and a little bit quicker. And I can see the evolution into the PS6 because it's inevitably where Sony are going to go because they've just kind of cast their die and they're like, that's what we're doing, you know. But I just couldn't, I just like for the money.
Yeah, I don't like these intergenerational or mid-generational, sorry,
Yeah,
releases. So I know someone who's got one, and he said, he can definitely see an improvement. But I'm like, is it enough of an improvement to warrant? Because in a couple of years' time, we're going to have the next generation, right? So
yeah.
it's that extra. It's that extra cost, and then we're going to get that fragmented market again. I know now they're better at it than it used to be.
Well, that's assuming Xbox don't bow out, right? Because
Well, all the
they're got nothing
rumors.
to lose, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. I did want to go back to one day one purchase, which we discussed this morning as well. And I was saying one of the things I remember about us was when you got the Xbox One day
Yeah,
one, you got the
yeah.
special edition. I can't remember. Was it Scorpio? I think.
Scorpio.
We couldn't
Yeah, yeah.
remember this morning. It's
No,
just hit me.
you got it,
Um,
and you didn't even Google it. Well
no,
done.
no, I didn't. It just hit me then. And yeah, I remember coming around because that had two things, right? That it was bundled. One was bundled. It was the Connect, right, which didn't
Yeah,
last long. But I remember even having one because you had to have it. And then
yeah,
remember,
that's it.
no, like you reminded me, you can't have it without it. We can't just stop it. And then they just stopped it. They flicked the
Yeah,
switch, as you said.
yeah,
But the other thing was, it came at the time. They had an app on the phone which could be like a second screen to the
yeah,
game, and I can't remember you had Dead Rising. I can't remember if it was 3, and I think on the phone you could see like your inventory, or you could call in
yeah,
attacks. And do you
yeah,
remember that?
yeah. I can't remember the name of it, but I remember
Is it
clearly what it
Glass?
was.
Xbox Glass?
The
No,
Xbox
was
Glass.
it
Yeah, it
Glass?
was.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it was again a really intuitive idea that kind of got dropped. And I guess because not many developers bought into it, and trying to code two things for a single game is a
Yeah.
bit of a ball ache. And but yeah, I mean, it was very clever at the time, and when you got it to work, and when it was a great little. At my age now, could I focus on two screens at once? I can
Yeah.
barely remember where the buttons are. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like it's just not going to happen. And that's speaking for someone who's playing one of the most complex button bashing games of all time in Dying Light 2. Like I can't remember all of those buttons for parkour moves.
Well,
Just don't even.
for me, that's FIFA. When did football become more than just shoot?
Exactly. Exactly that. I just want to press a button that makes me go forwards or backwards. Just give me that. I'm
Just
fine.
score the goal, shoot the ball. Yeah, so I remember getting that, and we were reminiscing this morning as well, weren't we, about the whole. I think it's fair to say, like, shambolic launch of that, because they were going more for it being the
It was
central
your media
entertainment
hub.
Yeah,
It was your media hub. It was you had your TV in and TV out, so you could essentially plug. And I did. You put your Skybox through it, and you control it. And again, very innovative at the time. And I think, look, really poorly marketed, right? It's going to come with automatic DRM. We can't just flick a switch and turn it off, and then they flick a switch and turn it. All of these things really, and I remember that E3 really well. I wasn't there, but watching it and kind of, going, this is a great system.
right?
Yeah, yeah. But this is a great idea. Why have you balls that up so bad?
Yeah.
And the furore in the media afterwards, in the gaming media, was just like, what are they doing? They're killing themselves, right?
Mm.
Which is eventually why they backtracked on the whole DRM and the renting of games. And I can't lend my friend a physical copy of a game I've bought.
Yeah.
They won't be able to. I'm sorry. What, you're going to license a game on an individual console? This is lunacy. That I had no problem with the TV media thing, right? Because actually, I think it worked really
it
well.
was good. I remember you had
And-
it set up, and it was
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
And I was actually disappointed when the follow-up console came out and didn't have it, because I was like, I like having a hub. I'm turning on one thing. Now I have to HDMI hop, across whatever. And look, I'm quite lucky. I've got a nice amp that does all that for me automatically, so it's not too much of a pain in the arse now. But I would have loved to have had that in a single system and kind of gone, I just press TV on my Xbox and I can go and watch Sky, or I can jump back to a game. Yeah, so not having it on the next one was like, it's a bit shit, isn't it? But not the end of the world, right? Because you now they've gone back to what they are best at, which is creating a great console. Although arguably what they're probably best at is renting games to people in a subscription service, because that's inevitably where, you know, Microsoft have decided to put all their eggs. And I have to say, I fucking love it. I mean, you know, we've you and I have had this conversation many times. You know, I think it's one of the best things that ever happened to gaming. You know, I don't mind that certain stuff drops off and comes back on, and you know, it doesn't. Oh look, I've lost access to GTA 5. Oh dear, what a shame. You know, but I don't mind that, because inevitably, if it's a game I want to play and it's dropping off, I've probably played it to death already, and it's going to sit back in that catalog that you talk about gathering dust anyway. So, you know, when I see something come up and kind of go, I'm going to do it. And no, I'm guilty of this, right? I subscribe to Game Pass Ultimate because I've got a PC, as you said. I want to play it anywhere. I want to stream cloud gaming. I want to play on my Xbox downstairs, all these great titles. You know, the studios they've chewed up, you know, and they're guilty of what a lot of people are, you know, buying real estate and then kind of flogging it on, or even worse, crushing it. You know, they do all that shit, right? But they've bought some incredible studios and come out with some incredible titles recently. And there was some, you know, Sony have decided to play a different game, but there was some really interesting stats around that I was listening to today. Like Sony, since the launch of the PlayStation 5, and I didn't realize this until I read it, only released 15 exclusives. There's only 15 exclusives on the PS5, which is now what, 3 years into its life cycle, 4 years. So you've got a very limited number of exclusives, which means you're not going to play them somewhere. You can't play them anywhere else, not even on PC at this time. And so more than 50% of PlayStation owners still play the PS4. So they haven't even moved with their ecosystem into, you know, the latest and greatest, because the PS4 is still a really rock solid, really good machine, right? I've got a PS4 Pro downstairs in my office that I never turn on, but it's still, you know, it sits there gathering dust, but it's still a great machine, you know. So Sony, I'm not sure, have kind of caught up to that. And I subscribe to their service as well, by the way. I'm not biased. As you said, I'm quite agnostic about my approach. And they've got some cracking games on there. But they took their time getting there. They kind of went, oh, we can do what Microsoft do. But when the service launched, it wasn't great. Like the quality of titles and what was on there wasn't great. And they very quickly, over the course of a year and a bit, kind of turned it around. They don't do day one exclusives like Microsoft do, and I think that's where Microsoft really have it in the bag, right? It's kind of like they've got the size and scale of buying great studios like Bethesda and people like that to be able to go, do you know what, here, have Indiana Jones for free, or not free, but have it, day one, have, you know, Atomfall day one, have, you know, all of these kind of great titles that are either anticipated or, you know, like the latest Doom, and you're like, oh my God, I'm just going to play that, right? It's worth the $12 a month.
Yeah.
You know, that I pay.
And this is the thing, right? Again, to call the age thing into account again, you got to look past the short-term history for gaming to see probably the long-term. Now, remember, Sony dominated with the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2. Then they take it after ball, because then when the 360 came out, Microsoft won that generation, you know, to use that term, won that generation. But then maybe did they get to look ahead to the future? Because we were saying the Xbox One, apart from the DRM thing, was probably the right console at the wrong time, which then Sony focused on the games.
Yeah.
And then Sony, people want a better term, won that. But then Xbox started pulling it around towards the end of that generation, didn't they?
Yeah.
Which has then led into the Xbox One, and the Xbox Series X, sorry. And I think we see these swings and roundabouts where maybe in the past, consoles or manufacturers like say Sony and Xbox tried to do something different, but gamers just wanted more games maybe at that time. Now it's a different world.
Yeah, I think the whole market and marketplace has changed. I mean, you look at, you know, like 23, 24, you know, 5 of the top 10 grossing games across all markets were mobile, by either Zynga or King, you know, like your Candy Crushes and you know, those sorts of things, which I have no time for, right? It's not something that interests me, but I'm not their demographic, right? A guy with disposable income who's a, you know, generational console gamer is not their demographic, right? I mean, I'm not a boomer by any stretch, but, you know, it's not me they're trying to target. It's the kids who, you know, can then, you know, put in a bit more money into each game to level up or whatever they do. And, you know, your Fortnites and things like that is, you know, again, great on mobile. So I think the whole marketplace is changing, where Microsoft have been very clever in this whole subscription model. It opens up that gate. And not only that, right, they bought King, right? So that,
Yeah.
they own one of the biggest players in that space. So they're never going to be, it doesn't get reported on their Xbox, when people look at, how much money they made or lost against Game Pass or whatever, they're not talking about their mobile sales and what they've made off of Candy Crush or what they've made, because that's another whole part of the market that they own. And they're like, well, we'll do what we want with Xbox now. Because to be honest, we can go and toy with the idea of doing a handheld, because let's be honest, we've got the money to do it, and we've got a subscription model that we know works, that we can just cut and paste onto it.
Yeah.
Or the Switch 2, or the, so, when we were growing up through this stuff, it was the console war was the thing, right?
Yeah.
You fanboy, Xbox or PlayStation, and it was all the whole, PlayStation sold twice as many as Xbox. But you kind of go, well, to be honest, the person who's going to have the last laugh is the person who's able to get enough people to buy into the subscription model. And the only way you're going to do that is not by growing your slice of the pie, it's by making a bigger pie, which is essentially what Microsoft are now doing, right? They're going, well, I'll just sell it to everyone.
But that's it, and that's what I was going to say about the Game Pass. Because at the start it's going to be bad. Let's not forget, you had to on the 360, and I think you had to on the PlayStation as well, but you had to pay for Xbox Live, didn't you? You had to pay to go online. And as part of that, you had Xbox Gold, which you got 2 free games a month. And that was never seen as a bad thing then. And in a sense, Game Pass is just that evolution, right? So you don't have to pay to get online. No, I can't remember now how it works. But ultimately, for me, Game Pass is just the evolution of that. It's just you've got bigger catalogue. Now, for me, I'm going to play games I'm never even going to think of buying. Yeah. But it's given me the chance to play them, and all of a sudden I quite like that. And I have bought a couple of games when they've disappeared from Game Pass, because I thought, do you know what, I actually do like that. Or a genre or a company that I've not thought of before. So that's what I was trying to say about the short-sightedness or the short history is, let's not forget, we had an element of it 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It's that next level of it.
And I remember at the time, everyone laughed at Microsoft when they did Xbox Gold. Stupid idea, right? It will never cotton on. It will never catch on. And then very quickly it was like, well, we'll give you a couple of games with it. Yeah, but that ain't going to make a difference, right? They're games that everyone will have bought or played previously. It won't be, And then suddenly it was like, oh, hang on a minute, there's an Assassin's Creed on there. All right, it's 2 years old, but I can play that. And, and for those who had bought it, it opened up a little bit of another, I haven't tried that before. And Sony still sat there kind of going, nah, this is nuts. Why would I bother doing that? We're just going to charge you to be online. That's all we're going to do. And they very soon, it took them about 3 years to go, maybe we should give away something. And it was that. So you're right. I think that is the very inception or that start of the evolution of Game Pass, and everything that happened there on in. And I'm genuine. I have no problem paying $12, $15, whatever it is a month, to have access to not just a broad catalogue of recent games and day one releases, but a whole back catalogue of really cool shit that I remember playing. Or even if I didn't get round to playing it, I can now go and have a dabble. Do you know what I mean? Like, well, who wouldn't want that, right? and this is coming from someone who hates not owning stuff. Right? I am. For me, I wanna own the shit that I pay for.
Yeah.
And I think it's the only that and a lease hire on a car is about the only concession I make to go in. No. I'm not. I want to. If I've got it, I don't want to rent it. I want to buy it. I want it to be mine. So I am like capitalism manifest, right? So for me to kind of go, I'm happy to pay these guys, money a month to rent this stuff that I really love and enjoy. So that's a quite a big thing for me.
I know a couple of people listening for sure, and some friends are very much the physical route, and I get that. And like you, I was that, and to some extent, I am that with my music. I very much I like my. I've
seen your vinyl
right?
collection.
Yeah,
yes,
I like my vinyl, and this all stems, your life or your priorities changes. So 4 years ago, I downsized my house. I don't have the space for it all. So with digital collection, I'm starting to see some of the appeal, because I can have the games I want, but without wondering where do I put them. And yes, I get some people saying, but that you don't own them. Yeah, I get that, but I'm still playing them. And if you can, brilliant with the physical. But I can't buy any more records because I've got nowhere else to put them. So I got, this is a
I'm
problem.
the same with Lego. I'd never rent Lego, but I don't think anyone would ever rent you Lego. But I've run out of room. But yeah, you're right. There is that. I kind of transitioned into it very slowly in a way that I think I surprised myself because like you, and I think I remember when we worked together, like you, I loved the special edition. Right,
Yeah, yeah.
I've still got my Arkham, Batman's limited edition statue downstairs
I've got
on
it's
Private
actually in my
Players.
living room now.
Right, and so I loved, and this was before limited editions, like 400 quid with a free pair of night
Yes,
vision
yeah.
goggles or whatever it was. These,
And this was back in the day when they had the game in there as well, right?
yeah, and the game existed, not a piece of paper. So I was like you, but then I think certainly, I think this generation is where I've really bought into it because when I worked back at Tesco, we were asked to come up with it was some sort of training thing, and we were asked to come up with what would you do to promote a thing at Tesco, and I convinced the team I was working with to work on. It was a bit like The Apprentice, that bullshit program. I convinced them to work on a basically a gaming online purchase model.
Yeah.
And during that time, that's not the important thing, but during that time, we did a lot of homework and research on the cost of creating games, physically manufacturing them, marketing them, all of that, and kind of working out what the difference was between that for a physical game and the digital copy of the game. And the difference was phenomenal. Like the costs that went into creating a physical version of a game for selling, shipping, all of those things, versus the very small cost of not the creating of the game itself, because that was a different thing, but post production, getting it out into people's hands digitally, and yet the cheek of publishers to kind of go, well, you can buy a physical copy and it's 50 quid or whatever it was at the time, but if you want it digitally, it's 70. And you're
Yeah.
like, why am I? And I was livid, like having done this work and kind of, what the fuck? How are you asking? And it's still the same is true today, right? The same is absolutely true. Unless you find a cheaper deal on Amazon or GameStop or something like that, you are inevitably paying a lot more for a digital copy of a game than you are for a physical copy,
Yeah.
which I still think to this day is bonkers.
Yeah, and that was the problem initially. I think when the Xbox was doing, when they were talking about the Xbox One, there was talk of digital future there. But
Yeah,
I think the difference being, especially in the last 5 years, like on the Xbox, because that's my primary reference, there's always sales and there's always massively discounted games. So yes, while new games are incredibly expensive, and I couldn't imagine buying it new online digitally. But with these sales, with these discounts,
yeah,
I've built up a massive catalogue because you can get them if you're prepared to wait.
yeah. I mean, I do, but I game the system slightly. So I go on CD keys and
Yes, yeah,
I buy the the Xbox vouchers or wallet or whatever it is for PlayStation cheap at a cheaper price when on discount, and I use those to fill my account and then buy the games, the full price games with those because I know I've paid less for them. But Amazon, interestingly, a few years ago cottoned on to this because what people were doing were buying Amazon vouchers at a highly discounted rate and then using the Amazon vouchers to buy the credit for the stores. And so they stopped. So you can't use Amazon vouchers to buy game credit now. They've
right.
stopped it completely, which is nuts, right?
Well,
But it is what it is.
Xbox rewards used to be really good. I used to constantly be
It
able to
did.
get like £20 and then maybe treat myself to a newish game because I'd got £20 credit. One
Not
thing,
anymore.
well, no. One thing I was going to say before I forget as well, when we were talking about the Xbox Gold, and I think was it PS Plus or something?
Yeah.
This is how console wars go. There was even monthly, you were waiting, or some fans were waiting for the games to be announced to then say, oh, the Xbox has beaten the PlayStation ones this month. I mean, we're talking about giveaway games, and then we're turning that into a battle. It was brilliant.
It's insane. And that's why, that kind of level of, I want to call it immaturity. I know it's probably not the right word, but around that thing is one of the reasons I stayed away from it completely, right? It wasn't even about being able to afford having both consoles. It was like, for me, it was like, what's the fucking point? Like in my world, if someone's happy with what they're doing, be happy with it. Do you know what I mean? I
Yeah.
mean, if you've chosen the Xbox as your path, if you've chosen Sony as your path, and you've developed this disgust or whatever for another, it's the same as football for me. You know, I'm not a big football fan, right?
Mm.
But it's the same thing, right? If you've chosen that, if you've chosen to support that team, why make the aggro against someone? What purpose does it serve? Right? You've chosen to play on PlayStation. That's your platform of choice. You love it. You enjoy it. You get everything you want from it. Why are you going to spend your time online or wherever you choose to going, well, fucking Xbox is properly shit, innit? What? Do you know what I mean?
I don't
It's
see
lost
people,
on me.
Yeah, I don't see people at work saying, "Oh, you've got a Volvo, have you? Well, yeah, you've got a Skoda." Yeah.
Do you know, it's nuts, right? So what, you know, oh, you're a Volvo fanboy.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're a Ford
Yeah,
driver.
I am actually, but that's for safety, all right? They're boxy and they're safe. Yeah, it's beyond me. I just think you do you, right?
Yeah,
Brother,
yeah.
if that's your thing, you do you. I'm happy with my choices.
I was going to jump back to what we were saying. You know what's funny? And sorry, my brain will keep jumping. Is, you know, having said that I'm much more relaxed digitally, and I've probably only got about 5 discs under my TV now. I would still feel really reluctant to buy a console without the disc drive.
I did, you see that, and that my first ever time doing that was the PS5. I had the choice because I was
Yeah.
lucky enough, getting day one purchase. I was lucky enough on the morning that it launched. I managed to get a pre-order in with Smiths, weirdly, and at the time I had a choice of the disc or discless. And I think at the time I was doing that whole kind of transitioning thing into the due to the Xbox into the digital download space, and I kind of went, "Yeah, I'll give it a go. Maybe it'll force me to do it," knowing that I was probably more likely to still play Xbox because it was
Mm.
kind of where I grew up in that space. So I did buy the discless version, and do you know what? The only thing I think that was a little bit of a frustration was I'd obviously had bought some games on like Ghost of Tsushima and things like that I'd bought on the PS4 Pro on disc that I wasn't then going to be able to play and
Right.
upgrade to the
Right.
PS5 version
Yeah.
because I'd have to buy it again. And so I left a lot of those games where they were until Sony kind of modeled their subscription service differently and started giving them away as part of the PlayStation Plus premium or whatever it is subscription model. So you know I now can do that, is my point. You know, and my saves still work and things like that, which is great. But that was the only point of frustration. Other than that, everything I've got PS5 wise is all digital. I think the only bit is I haven't increased the memory on it. So you know, and it's something I want to do, and until recently hadn't done on the Xbox as well. But about a month ago I bought the SSD
Yes. Yeah.
to upgrade the site, and it's not a game changer, but by God, I'm glad I did it.
Yeah.
Right, because the size of these games and moving things between drives now, I've got a 5 terabyte drive attached to an external one, but now moving stuff between drives, it's like, you know, between those two drives, the internal and the
Because
SSD,
you can only
is like,
play the X games from the internal drive, right? So it doesn't matter if you've got the external drive. I think
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, you only get the benefits of the speed of it from the internal drive. You can still play them from the external drive, but who wants Cyberpunk on there trying to play that, you know, without any of the
Yeah.
assets that you've got? It's like, you know, so it's a bit nuts. So having the SSD, which works exactly the same as the internal drive, and having things like, which again I think is the true game changer that Xbox brought into the ecosystem on this platform, is the quick resume. Is just
Yeah,
fucking brilliant when
that's
it works
really good.
properly.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
there are a few games that it just did shit on. Avowed being one of.
Yeah, and I think Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I kept losing game saves. I
Don't
think.
even talk to me about that. Don't talk to me about the 17 hours of gaming that I lost
It's
on
about the
that
same with
game.
me. I was constantly losing like 3 or 4 hours of save at a time. That I played the same bit over and
Right,
over again.
17 hours, right? And I went through, and in that gameplay, I'd beaten every single one of the witches to get Thor's armor,
Yeah.
right? And I genuinely lost my shit. I mean, I didn't break anything like I did with God of War on the lift when I broke my PlayStation controller over that. But I genuinely put the game down for over a year before I could go back to it
Yeah.
and replay it. 17 hours. I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot, But in that game, it's a lot.
It is, yeah. On that drive thing, it is funny where my brain still goes, because the only discs I've got are ones I think where I bought them from Amazon to get a new game slightly cheaper. But yeah, quick resume, I'd forgotten all about that, because you see, it just becomes part of every day then after a while, doesn't it?
Exactly.
You
And I think
forget
that's
that you
what
never
makes
had
it.
it. Yeah.
That's what makes it a great feature, right? It's something that you just go, oh, that works. It's only when you then go back to, look, the PlayStation 5 is great. Like I said, I'm playing Dying Light 2 on there at the moment because it was part of it was free. I'd always wanted to play it, never bothered buying it because it didn't think I'd get into it. Love it now. And the PlayStation is great because you can put it in rest mode and I can go back and resume from where I was, but I can't play another game and jump between them like I can on the Xbox. I'm literally locked into that if I want to, I mean, thankfully the saves are quite frequent, but if I want to play something else, I'm unloading that essentially and loading something else, and then I'll have to load it, so there is that. And I think that for me is part of the brilliance of what Microsoft have done so well with that, with the One X. I think it's just, it's such a great way to play, if you like.
It's going to be interesting to see what is next, because I think there is at least one more console as we know them now from Xbox anyway, because I think they have said,
I think so.
I think 27, I think they talk about it. So it'd
Yeah.
be interesting to see what they do. It'd probably be more, it'll probably be more hub again, if you know what I mean, maybe like Media Hub. I don't know. Do you think they'll go there?
I don't know. Well, what would I like to see? I think I think it's going to be one of the longest generations we've seen. I'm not convinced. I mean, we saw a lot of this stuff leak out, last year or the year before about, this all white circular Xbox One X that was, a bit of an intermediary again. I'm not sure they're going to do that, right? They kind of already launched this 2 terabyte model, the white one, but I can't see them doing something in between. I think they will just go to the next, whatever that next thing is. Look, we know they've focused on just buying up studios and becoming a massive publisher right now. So, it'd be interesting what Microsoft's game is. I can easily see them going into the handheld market. And look, we should never underplay what crazy shit Nintendo are going to come out with next. I mean, the Switch 2 looks phenomenal, right? I mean, I love my Switch. My girls, they're 10 and 11, but their primary mode of play is the Switch. They love those things, and they buy every game they can, that I'll let them, to be fair. But they're into Zelda, they're into, so I think there's this younger generation coming up. They want that flexibility of something like the Switch that you can, they often at the weekends, if I'm watching telly or gaming, they'll take the Switch and they'll take it out of the stand and they'll take the controllers off and they'll be playing together on the little screen. So, they want this modular approach. And I think, the Switch 2 looks fantastic. It's going to be a great kit like the first one was. My daughter's got her own, the non-detachable, the portable one that she plays with all the time. I'll pick up a Switch 2, right? And I'll replace the Switch, or my daughter will have it, whatever. And it's just that proof that it's not all about the power that sits behind it, or how good the graphics are, or how, when they're doing that, Microsoft and Sony are off kind of trying to outbeat each other with, who's got the biggest server farm or who's got the, the greatest, GPU, or, Nintendo is sitting there kind of going, yeah, but I've got Breath of the Wild. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like,
I was thinking as you were saying this, it is great because there's this video I saw on social media years ago, and it was I think it was a kebab shop or a chip shop, but 2 blokes were like fighting, and I imagine one to be Xbox, the other to be Sony, and there was a guy at a table just nonchalantly eating his chips, and I imagine that to be Nintendo. It's like, you get on with what you're doing. I'm doing my own thing.
They do, right? I mean, these guys are crazy, and they're Japan, like, is one place I'd love to go, but I think they know their gaming shit, right? And it's not for me. I mean, you're a big JRPG fan, right? But
Yes,
it's not. I never fell into that kind of turn-based combat. I think I played Final Fantasy VII a couple of times. I played, but it wasn't. I think the closest I got was kind of the Mana games, like Secret of Mana, and I loved all of those. But again, it was more live combat than it was, more Zelda-esque than it was, Final Fantasy. But they know their gaming, and some of the biggest franchises and greatest games, the Biohazard, Resident Evil stuff, all sprung from there, and to And I think, if Nintendo and Microsoft, in fairness, play it smart and kind of not partner up, but kind of go, do you know what? You can get your Game Pass over here because, we're going to spread the love. I mean, come on. I mean, I'm just not sure Microsoft are going to do it if they're bringing out their own handheld. Are you going to play friendly with Nintendo and kind of go, here's a great handheld that'll play your games, or launch your own one that does it just as successful? I don't know.
Yeah, because there was a whole rumor about them two cozying up, and I would love it because, again, I would love a Switch, but again, I know I wouldn't spend the time on it to make it worthwhile. So if I could have those games on an Xbox handheld and play my Xbox games as well as Steam games,
Again,
it's throwing
right?
my money at the screen now.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, this is the nuts thing, and your analogy of the guys in the chip shop. I mean, it's exactly right. I mean, Nintendo just sit down and go, "We'll just do us. Don't
Yeah,
worry about it. We'll do our own thing, right? I don't need Call of Duty. I don't need FIFA. I don't need they did none of this stuff. They're just like, we've got our shit together, and we know what our people love,
yeah.
right? And it's Wii Sports and it's Zelda and it's and
Well,
they gotta do their
Well,
own
this
thing.
is it. Something I want to talk about in the future is, for me, even some of the big franchises I've loved for years, I've fallen out of them. Not for any reason. And they seem to, at Nintendo, they seem to just get the idea of gaming being fun. And I think that's the
Yeah.
key, right? Isn't it? It's
It
fun.
has to be, right? What's the point of a game? I mean, that's the whole point of a game, right?
Yeah.
Unless it's football. It's supposed to be fun,
Mm.
right? It's supposed to be something you enjoy
Yeah,
partaking in.
yeah,
I think that's the kind of almost a dictionary definition of a game. So,
yeah, yeah,
if you're not doing that, what's the point? And you're right. Nintendo had this very essence. Like I said, I was joking earlier, right? I'm going to sell a console with a stick, but
Mm.
that's essentially what they did. And everyone went, "What are you doing? We're serious, right? We're holding esports competitions and we're doing." And they're going, "No, no, 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 no. You're going to wave this around your living room and just potentially destroy your TV if you don't put a strap on." But I'm not sure I thought I'd say strap on in this podcast, but you know what I mean? It's that. They just understand. I'm ignoring the Wii U, by the way, because it was fucking atrocious. But they just, I don't know, they understand. You're right. They understand fun. They understand that connection. It's
Yeah.
not about making the biggest, the baddest, the best. It's about making something that everyone can enjoy. And we have, like, family wise, like Mario Party, right? On a rainy Saturday, you're kind of like, "Oh, what are you gonna do? Oh, stick Mario Party on, right?" You just sit and play. It's a board game, but it's more than a board, but it's fun. Everyone enjoys it. There's
Yeah, yeah,
competition,
yeah.
but it's not competitive in that, "Oh, I've killed you now. You're out of the
Well,
game. Sorry."
It's brought back something. Let's go back, looking at the time, almost an hour ago now. You said something about back in the day, it was couch co-op, couch gaming. And we've lost that, really, haven't
Yeah.
we? But I guess the Nintendo games have, the Nintendo systems have brought that back, haven't they? A little bit.
I don't think they ever lost it. I think that was always the common thread, was always create something that everyone can do together. I mean, Famicom, right?
Mm.
If you're gonna have something
Yeah.
called Famicom,
Yeah.
right, which is basically family computer,
Yeah, yeah,
right? That is part of their ethos. It's kind of bred into their DNA. So that that is. I don't think they ever lost that. Everything they've always designed has always been make it for everyone.
yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
even down to that design of the Switch where you click the handles off and you put another, and everyone can use it as a mini controller. WarioWare, all of those sorts of things were all designed for everyone to do together, not necessarily families, but friends or whatever. And I think your Nintendos and Sonys have very much taken their eye off of that ball and kind of gone, no, it's all about and look, the proliferation of the internet generation and being online is going to do that, right? I mean, you're gonna have. I mean, I say earlier, I was playing Dying Light 2, and I was sitting there, and all of a sudden, this weird voices came over my speakers. I'm like, "What's going on?" And my wife was like, What is that?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And then some 11-year-old had joined my game because it was automatically online, like by default.
Yeah.
And I hadn't noticed it. I've been playing it for best part of 2 weeks, and I hadn't even noticed. So, I've had to go in and change the settings to single player only, because by default it was like, yeah, just let anyone walk into your room, and play with you. And I'm like, that's not my thing, right? I'm like, I'm open, but I don't want 11-year-olds playing on my game. So I think, your Nintendo, your Microsoft, your Sony's have kind of gone, right, well, if evolution has told us that everyone is always connected, don't worry about sitting together as a family and doing it. Just do it with your mate who lives over in America or Norway or wherever they are. And I don't mind either, but I think maybe because of how we've grown up generationally, whatever, I've always leaned into that. I'd rather do it with the family at home, on a screen in front of us and that's probably why I'm very much a single player, limited co-op with some friends sometimes, but I won't just go and jump into a pool of 16 people playing Call of Duty. I used to, but I'm kind of like, it's just not there for me anymore.
I was going to say, and I want to start wrapping this episode up shortly, but I hadn't played online or competitively for a long time, but recently with Alex and Joey from the Game Club pod, who listeners know I love them here, I started getting back into Call of Duty. And the one thing, I love it because it's an opportunity to catch up with them, but yeah, as much as I still love gaming, my reactions weren't what they were 15 years ago. That's all I will say. That's a sad truth.
There's a lot to be said for that and eyesight. And to be honest, I'll probably go back to Call of Duty or something like that online when I've run out of your mum jokes. Do you know what I mean? Like when I need to refill, because it's kind of that for me is what it's about at the moment. Now you get online and you're getting quick scoped by a 12-year-old, and you're kind of going, what is the point of me trying to do this while being abused at the same time and then teabagged or whatever the kids do these days? I'm just like, it's not my thing.
But before we move on, because I did have some questions for you. One of the other memories, I was going to say that I had of us gaming, there was once, I don't know if you remember this, but it was you, me, and somebody else we worked with, Tom, and I think you were with him. You were going out with him that night, and we played Borderlands. I can't remember one of the Borderlands. We played 3-player co-op. And I can't remember if you or he, or I know definitely he had a couple of drinks. And I remember you or he was getting annoyed because you two were like fighting the big enemies, and I was hanging back then just nicking all the loot. And I just had that.
It sounds about right. Yeah. I mean, if I'd had a few drinks at that point.
But swiftly moving on. Yeah. Yeah, I had a few questions for you, which I told you. So we've kind of spoken about some of this, but if you could pick sort of everything you've had, and as I said to you, I'm not going to get you to stick to this because we are going to do delves into the future, but top 3 systems.
So definitely, and obviously I spoke at length this at the start, the Master System, because it opened that door for me. It was the thing. I think then, because of the quality of what was produced at that time, and I would urge anyone to go and buy, the ones you can pick up with the kind of micro Super Nintendos, because I put hard-earned paperboy cash into buying that from a Littlewoods catalog, right? It was the first thing I genuinely ever owned that I bought for myself as a console, and I loved it to bits, probably genuinely to bits, blowing in that, to make the fucking cartridge work, and all of that, and it didn't ever work, but that that whole growing through that era of adolescence and playing on that, I loved. And then I think the first Xbox, because again, it's all an emotional attachment, but it opened that doorway to gaming that I thought had been closed, because I'd had kids and I'd kind of fallen out of love with it, or by necessity stopped doing anything, and it was just a random conversation with my wife kind of going, you should love gaming, I'd love to get an Xbox. And as my then girlfriend, she just bought me this Xbox, and I was just like, quite emotional at the time. And then just playing Halo, 'cause I don't think I ever truly lost contact with gaming. I think because I'd read about the development and what Bungie had been doing, and I was, oh my god, I'd love to play that. I really want to drive a Warthog. I really want to shoot some aliens in the face, and I love that kind of that 3 seconds of fun ethos that they built around the whole core gameplay. And I was like, so I think those 3. I love all the bang whiz pop of the latest generation of consoles. I love the fancy games, and I love the graphics and the sound and everything. But I think from an emotional perspective, they'd be my 3.
Okay, yeah. For me, I'll go through them quickly. Even though the Commodore 64 was my first system, I'd say the Commodore Amiga, because that was what my eyes then really opened up to gaming then, and kind of that it was quite a generational leap. Randomly, I'm going to say the Game Boy, just because again, how much fun I got from that portable unit. You know, it was a green, it was a monochrome screen, right? But the amount of
Yeah.
fun I've got from that and the portability. And then I think I would say the Xbox 360, mainly because that was again my first foray into like online gaming, and it was just such a great console. I would say those three. The next one, which I always find an unfair question, but if you could pick three games or gaming franchises, say, are your favorites through time, which again I know is difficult, but we'll do delves into various things in the future.
So I guess looking back, anything Zelda related, I loved Zelda right from the very beginning, right from like pre-Ocarina of Time, like Legend of Zelda. Still think it's one of the most phenomenal pieces of creation, you know, from a gaming ever. You know, just the way, and again, you know, Japanese, but just brilliant. And then I spoke about it earlier, Half-Life.
Okay.
You know, I have played that game so much. I'm running through it right now. Actually, a second run through of Half-Life 2 and episode 1 and 2 on my PC. I also bought the remake of Half-Life 1 that
Oh
those
yes.
external devs had done. I put money into them
Yeah.
to play that as it was released. And then thirdly, I think the franchise more recently, I guess, that I've loved a lot has been The Witcher. You know, I bought The
Yes. Yeah,
Witcher
you
1,
have. Yeah.
I got The Witcher 2, and The Witcher 3 I kind of played through so heavily, you know, and I guess that, you know, that RPG thing, you know, the love of RPGs and that, you know, the connected worlds and storytelling is something I love. So I think they're the three, not necessarily all-time favorites, but certainly three that have given me the most back. Do you know what I mean?
Okay. No, that's all really good. I'm going to do one's different generation. So I'm going to go right back to Sensible Soccer on the Amiga,
Ooh, yeah.
because just
I
love that
remember Sensible Soccer.
simple fun. The amount of time. This is what I'm looking at. The amount of time I probably sunk into games, and that was a
The
massive.
top down one with the
Yeah,
little,
yeah.
yeah, I remember
Just little
Sensible Soccer. Yeah,
sprites
yeah,
rather
yeah,
than graphics.
yeah,
So
yeah.
and yes, Sensible Soccer and all its variations. Anyone who's listened to this long enough knows for me, Mass Effect is probably one of my all-time favorite game series. Absolutely adore Mass Effect. And then I was actually stuck for the third one. And I'm going to say Assassin's Creed, but I'm going to say specifically the Ezio trilogy
I
for
nearly
me.
went there. I
Yeah.
nearly went to
Yeah.
Assassin's Creed, but I think it's become, and I'm really hopeful about Shadows, but I think it's become quite bloated.
Yes, it
And it's
definitely has.
become a victim of its own success, because I still remember playing the very first one and how limited and specific it was in its brilliance.
Mm.
And I know they tried to recreate that Mirage, and I haven't played it all the way through, and I'm still not convinced. But yeah, I think you're right. If you limit to that Ezio trilogy, and I'm gonna say Black Flag,
Oh
because
yes, yeah.
my
Yeah.
favorite all-time Assassin's Creed was Black Flag.
I didn't expect to like it as much as I did. Yeah.
Oh, such a good game. I mean, I'd love to see them, you know, just do a bit of a tidy up on that and re-release it. I think that would be phenomenal. But yeah,
But no, you're right. The last couple I've not played because it's just become too much. But the Ezio specifically, and funny thing, back when you could trade games here, because I don't think you can anymore because Game Now don't do it. But
CEX, I
yeah,
think Sex is
that's
the only
true.
place
Yeah,
you can do it. Yeah.
but I remember because my wife tends to do it all for me, and when I was trading in Assassin's Creed, I'll never forget. She came back and she goes, "Oh, the guy at the shop said, are you sure? Because this will be a great franchise in the future." And I said, "Yeah, I just want my £8 or whatever it is to give me." To be fair, he was spot on. He was spot on. Right. And the last question I threw at you a couple of hours ago, is there a game or gaming franchise that you would like to come back or see come back or maybe reinvented in some way?
So it's a little bit of a cheat, I get, but so I would love to see, and I do follow on X. Is Half-Life 3 out yet? I would love to see.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would love to see the continuation, because
Fair.
it ended on such a note. And I haven't played Half-Life Alex yet, and I'm still sorely tempted to buy the kit just to be able to do it. I've got a rig powerful enough now, and I'm still tempted to buy a headset just so I can play it. I did watch it for a while on YouTube, and it made me so motion sick that I thought I maybe shouldn't do this. It's the only thing that put me off. So that, and then the other one, which is a little bit of a cheat because it's happening. I'm really, really hopeful about the next Fable.
Oh, right, yes.
I
Yeah.
fucking loved Fable. I genuinely, as much as Peter Molyneux is a bit of a,
Take all those overconfident, it's going to
yeah,
have this, a tree's
exactly,
going to grow, and you're going to say,
right. But the games themselves were
yeah,
just so archetypical, Monty Python-esque, Terry Pratchett type storytelling were just wonderful, and they were just brilliant games. And I've recently started playing through Fable 2 again, and I just so I really want to see that be successful, because I think again, the studio creating it, who did Forza, and I just think they deserve another phenomenal win, and I think that could be it. And everything I've seen so far, I mean, anything with Richard Ayoade in it, right? I mean,
yeah,
I'm sold.
yeah.
So I'm genuinely really looking forward to that, and I think a bit of a cheat because it's already happening, but that I'm just really hopeful for.
No, I agree with you. I think that's a franchise I think needs to work, because again, we need those fun, like I said, you hit nail on the head, like Pratchett / Monty Python-esque. Yeah. And Half-Life 3, yeah, I mean, if ever is going to happen.
If ever, yeah. There's rumours and rumblings.
Yeah.
We'll see. I mean, I'm desperately hoping. I mean, maybe it's a genie in a bottle thing, but maybe whiskey in a bottle might be more hopeful. But
We'll keep listening to Gaming Views. If we hear about it. For me, I'm going to do two random ones. Right, one hit me while we were doing this, and do you know what I would love to come back? Did you ever play? Is it 1 versus 100? Was it on the 360? It was like an online game
the quiz
show.
game.
Yeah,
yes,
the quiz game.
I do. Yeah.
And I remember winning, I think, 800 Microsoft points. So yeah, was that £2? But yeah, I found that fun. It was a fun community thing where it had that bit of excitement to it because you could actually win. So I would love to see that. And the other one, really random, and I think we're past all the peripherals and all that sort of thing, but did you ever have DJ Hero?
It was I played it.
Yeah.
I definitely played it. I don't think I ever had it. I had Rock Band and Guitar Hero and a number of that, but I didn't have DJ Hero. Mainly because, again, I'm not as dexterous as many people suspect I might be. And I think I would have fumbled the end goal with that one.
I would love that back. If anyone's listening who can help make that happen. It was, if I'm honest, it was probably more the mashups they had in it were really good. But just, it was just, a fun game because you had Guitar Hero, Rock Band, etc., etc. That came out. It's just the same, right? But it just felt a little different because it was a type of music and just that different experience of playing that game. But those are the two I would have. So
nice. I'd buy it if it came out. I'm a sucker for that sort of thing. So I'd definitely buy it and play it.
Look, you got two people here that would buy it. So make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, what more do you want?
Okay, well. Thanks, Dan. I think that's episode 1 done out of the way. As I said, we've got a lot we want to talk about and cover. So, I guess watch your space. Was there anything else you wanted to say about anything we've said before we wrap up?
No, I think I've talked long and hard enough, Daniel San. It's been an absolute pleasure. I look forward to many more of these. As you can tell, I genuinely love games and gaming and love discussing it with you even more. And it beats doing it on a Sunday morning dog walk. So,
Yeah. Well, thank you. Right back at you. And so thank you for listening. Like I said, we're not aiming to be like a reviewing show. I mean, there are other podcasts out there already that do that. And so hi to the Game Club Pod. Yeah, we're not really going to review games and such, although we may look at franchises. But like I said, I think we just want to have a look at gaming as a whole and just talk about what we're seeing and some of the things we've seen, right?
Might be quite opinionated about some games. I mean, it's not a review.
No, that's what I'm saying. We're not going to review it.
Don't get me started on Dark Souls.
Yeah, we were talking about that. Sorry, Joey, earlier. We'll cover that at some point. But no, absolutely, we'll cover games, but we're not going to sit here and like go in the ins and outs of it. So, I think I'm going to call that a wrap on the pilot episode of Gaming Views. So, catch me next week for another episode of the normal Casting Views, but do keep an eye out for the next episode of this.
Dan with a gaming flair, pixel dreams and worlds to share, joystick tales and button cues.
2, 3, 4. If I want your opinion, I will give it to you. Come on, check what we've got, 'cause you